we find perfection in just awareness. And that's the kind of wonder of this human birth, is that we can actually do this, because, in terms of the human condition, it's so, the thinking mind tends to complicate everything. Like the animal world is much more simple and basic, dealing with procreation and survival, where we have, we, because of our ability and our intelligence, we can create, we farm land, we can survive, create all kinds of conditions for survival. We have moral precepts, about procreation and things like this. So we have various uh, abilities to create good images, good ideals of equality and freedom and justice and fairness. We can, that's the intellect. And then with meditation, we're not we're not coming from the intellect anymore, but from pure awareness of the intellect. So the perfect images you create in your mind, the ideals, come and go. They can't sustain themselves. And then you notice that just physically, how long can you sit without feeling some kind of discomfort, or stand, walk, or lie down? Breathing, breathing is when you stop breathing, you're dead. So breathing is important for living, for the human form to survive. And we have to eat in order to survive. And we need medicine for illnesses. And we need shelter. We don't have, coming from Dublin yesterday, the day before yesterday, we drove through fields where there's rain and sheep out in the field. I felt sorry for them. I mean, sitting in a nice van, safe, and the sheep couldn't create such conditions. So in some ways, it's being a human being is a great blessing, but also a curse, because we can, through our proliferating thinking habits, we create endless complicated problems about our lives, about ourselves. And that's why learning to listen to yourself, not in a critical way, even if the thoughts are terrible, bad thoughts. They are what they are, rather than seeing them as in terms of bad, they are like this, and they arise and cease. Wuto arises and ceases. And when everything ceases, it's, the senses are still active. You don't zombie, or you don't drop dead or faint, but suddenly you're aware of the stillness, the silence, where there's no suffering. So the first two noble truths are suffering and the causes of suffering, and the third and fourth are the end of suffering. So suffering is to be understood, and through understanding it, we let go of the causes of suffering, which is the third noble truth, the nirodha, the end of suffering.
Mayam Bante Tisarnena Saha Pancha Silani Yachama Dutiyampi Mayam Bante Tisarnena Saha Pancha Silani Yachama Tatiyampi Mayam Bante Tisarnena Saha Pancha Silani Yachama
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa
Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi.
Buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi
Dhammang saranang gacchāmi.
Dhammam saranam gacchāmi
Sanghang saranang gacchāmi.
Sangham saranam gacchāmi
Dutiyampi buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi.
Tutiyampi buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchāmi.
Tutiyampi dhammam saranam gacchāmi
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchāmi.
Tutiyampi sangham saranam gacchāmi
Tatiyampi buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi.
Tatiyampi buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchāmi.
Tatiyampi dhammam saranam gacchāmi
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchāmi.
Tatiyampi sangham saranam gacchāmi
Tisarana gamanang nititaṃ. Banadipata veramani sikkhabadaṃ samadhiyāmi.
Panatipata Viramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami
Adinadana veramani sikkhabadaṃ samadhiyāmi.
Adhinatana Viramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami
Game sumichachara veramani sikkhabadaṃ samadhiyāmi.
Kame Sumichachara Viramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami
Musawada veramani sikkhabadaṃ samadhiyāmi.
Musawata Viramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami
Sura meraya machabama tatana veramani sikkhabadaṃ samadhiyāmi.
Sura Meraya Machapamatana Viramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami
Imani pancha sikkhabadani silena sukhatinyanti. Silena poka sambhata. Silena niputinyanti dasama silang visotaye. Hmm? Yes.
I don't think anybody's making the formal request. If you just like to carry on.
So this tradition of taking the 5 precepts, 3 refuges, 5 precepts. This is a traditional form in Thailand and Theravadan countries. So we use it because it's the 3 refuges in Buddha Dhamma Sangha are important to consider. What do we mean by that when we talk about taking refuge in Buddha and Dhamma and in Sangha? Because these are, for most of you, are kind of foreign words. And Buddha, what is that? What is Dhamma? What is Sangha? If you're taking refuge in it, it can be just a perfunctory chant, a ceremonial condition that we use, but it's much more profound than that. And I found, I like to give the 3 refuges because it's such a beautiful thing to offer people when they ask. And bhikkhus, Buddhist monks, we can't give the precepts unless we're asked to do it. So, they have this sense of we're not trying to convert you or impose a religion upon you, but you have to make yourself, if you want these precepts, these 3 refuges, then you ask for them. So it's quite different from being a missionary where you're trying to convince or convert people, to where you're encouraging people to reflect and consider what they really want, what they need. And so the refuge in Buddha is in awareness, like Bhutto, the mantra Bhutto that I was talking about, or Bhutang Saranang Gacchami, is like take refuge in awareness here and now. So it's not some kind of refuge in some mystical force in the universe like Buddha, or in the Gautama, the Buddha, who lived 2,564 years ago, not taking refuge in a memory of a sage that has passed away, but in the here and now, the awareness here and now. So when you take refuge in Buddha, Bhutang Saranang Gacchami, see that as a reminder to be aware here and now, because this is where experience always is always in the present moment. And then Dhammang Saranang Gacchami is take refuge in Dhamma. What is the Dhamma? And we use words like ultimate reality or just plain reality or ultimate truth. These are words, translations from Pali to English. But what is ultimate truth? It's an abstract idea. What is it? And in terms of here and now, what is Dhamma here and now, ultimate truth? And so they're taking refuge in awareness. Bhutto is the witness. Dhamma is the awareness itself, the wisdom, the perfection, the total. So when we talk about Dhamma, it's perfect. But what do we mean by that? We use these words like perfect or ultimate truth. But the reality of Dhamma is always here and now, which is awareness, consciousness here and now. So it all resolves into the present reality. And Sangha is those who practice accordingly. those who develop the practice of awareness and trust in awareness, cultivate awareness. So you've got, in the symbols for Buddha, like Buddha Rupas. So you have images of Buddha, but you don't take refuge in an image. In Dhamma you have the Tripitaka, the sacred texts, but you don't take refuge in the sacred texts. And for Sangha you have the Bhikkhu Sangha, and you don't take refuge in Bhikkhu Sangha, you take refuge in Sangha, which is practicing according to the teachings of the Buddha. So when you start seeing Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha and trying to, and just reflecting on what these mean really in a practical way, not just an abstract adopting a foreign language into your own language or just adhering to another religion from the one you previously believed in. It's much more direct and useful. So when I give the 3 refuges, I quite like doing that because it's like you're asking me to give you something really good, to remind you of the here and now and your ability, individual human beings' ability to reflect, to use wisdom with your life, rather than just be the helpless victims of conditions and circumstances. Then the precepts about not intentionally taking life, and the first one, and the second one, not taking things that belong to others, not stealing. Third precept, not to take advantage through sexual activities of others. And the fourth one is right speech, developing a sense of time and place and what is proper, encouraging and honest in terms of speech, and then refraining from intoxicants or drugs that tend to change consciousness into something else, where we lose mindfulness or change the state of mind to something that gets dependent on other conditions. So these are the kind of foundations of meditation. Sila, they're called sila. And these precepts are, when we try to live with with these precepts as a reflection, it's about behavior and speech. And so, it's quite, in Buddhism, I found it quite wonderful to realize that morality or sila was about action and speech, because my background in the Christian upbringing was even a bad thought was a sin. A dirty thought was a sin. And so, you not just bad speech or bad behavior, but the thinking process. When you're adolescent, you're experiencing physical changes that you're quite mystifying, and so sometimes your thoughts aren't all that right or beautiful or good, and then you feel like you're sinning. Where with Buddha Dhamma, the sila is about action and speech, which you can take responsibility for. You can, just in monastic life, you take responsibility for what you say and how you use your body in the prescribed precepts of the Vinaya. And then in terms of Dhamma, then the bad thoughts or evil thoughts or dirty thoughts or angry emotions are seen in terms of Dhamma as conditions that arise and cease and not self. So it gives you perspective, it gives you a foundation, the precepts, to reflect from in terms of living in a way that you're not intentionally causing trouble and misery to others. You respect life and you respect individual creatures. The first precept oftentimes is not to take the life of another human being. So, you can, some people depend on fishing and hunting for food, and can they keep the first precept? Well, I've known monks in Thailand who kind of say it's just about not killing other human beings, because so much, people depend on livelihood for fishing or for, killing animals. But you can refine it. Like for monks, we can't kill anything. We take responsibility for even the respect for life of even mosquitoes and flies and very annoying creatures, which is quite a challenge, especially in Thailand where there are a lot of mosquitoes. It was very much a challenge for me because my upbringing was to kill mosquitoes and flies, and I never felt guilty about it. I felt it was a duty. And in Wat Pah Pong, in Ubon, Luang Por Chah's monastery, there's so many mosquitoes. But that kind of patience and observing, the desire to feeling annoyed with mosquitoes and wishing they weren't there, and you're witnessing these mental states in regards to this precept of nonviolence, which you take responsibility for, and then you observe the tendency towards violence. It doesn't mean you never have violent feelings, but it means you don't act on them. Or speech is an important one nowadays, where there's so much political correctness, and there's such a conflict about freedom of speech. We have a right to say what we feel and think. It's my human right to express myself, whatever that might be, and yet there's political correctness, which means you can't say certain words because they might offend somebody. So it's very confusing time, about speech itself, freedom of speech. What is that? But in this precept, it's about right speech, proper speech, and that depends on time and place. So that takes awareness, how to say things that, if I use abusive words or insulting racial slurs, that's not being responsible. That's just I'm free to say these things, but then it's going to offend so many people, and for no reason, So in Samadhi, the right speech, right Samavaja is right speech, developing this sense of being able to speak in a way that is proper and encouraging and to people, rather than through just freedom of speech to insult or say what you think at the moment. So this is the challenge of the 5 precepts. Kind of when we live with these 5 precepts, you develop a sense of trust. You come in to trust people. In monasteries, For example, there's a high level of trust among monks because of the Vinaya. So you live in Amaravati, for example, in England. The sense of trust among the Sangha is very high because of the intention of the monks and the nuns is to live with these precepts. So there's you feel this sense of respect and gratitude for that kind of trust, where when you're living in a city, you can't trust your neighbors. You don't even know who they are. so it's, this sense of trust is definitely encouraged through committing oneself to these precepts. So the refuges and the precepts, the beginning, the Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa, is a traditional chant of respect for the enlightened perfection, the Holy One. And what is that? What is Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa? There's a chant, and it's beautiful in its translation, but in the reality, it's respect for showing this love for truth and ultimate reality, perfection. So these are the ceremonies in this tradition, which, coming from Thailand, we bring these into European scene because they're beautiful customs, and people sometimes think they're unnecessary, but it's a form that you can use to reflect from too. It's not just learning an ancient language and being able to chant Pali, but it also has its ability to instruct and to remind us, because we do forget. We forget who we are, and time and place, we get carried away by our feelings or habits. And it's these kind of thoughts, it's like Buddho is a good reminder when you get carried away with emotions or fears or doubts, just to think Buddho rather than try to control everything or just follow your feelings of the moment. So in monastic life, this whole way is a monastic form. This traditional form is a very reflective form, and that's how Luang Por Chah emphasizes use, is rather than just ceremonial or traditional customs, which any religion can degenerate into, just going through the forms, the customs, and performing the rituals. Suddenly the tradition suddenly has, kind of it's practical rather than just superficial. So this Sunyata identifies itself as a Theravada Buddhist center, and just to try to realize what that is, what they're trying to create here is something very good, and an opportunity for all of us to meet together like this, to reflect, to meditate, to remind ourselves, because it's so easy in a busy life to get carried away with all the problems, personal problems, family problems, political problems that are forever, right in your face all the time in modern life. And we need time for retreats, time to remove ourselves from stressful situations just to get perspective on it again. Doesn't mean we reject life or the world, but we're not, we need occasions, opportunities, conditions that we can remove ourselves from particular stressful situations in our daily lives to contemplate, to reflect upon. I stopped thinking. I have hearing difficulties.
She's asking about attachments, and she says it seems like it's necessary in helping the children who have attachments and stuff like that, how to distinguish between healthy attachments and the type of attachments you let go of in delusion.
Well, attachment, it's not the attachments are get rid of them, but recognize them. You know, when you become obsessed with something and you're attached to it, and children, you know, we learn through attachment. And when you're a child, you're innocent, so you're kind of like a blank check. You can write anything on it, and you know, so you know, children, because of their innocence, they're influenced by the conditions around them, by what their parents are like, by their emotions of their brothers and sisters, family, their cultural bias. They just absorb, like, because their innocence is quite pure. And that's what we generally find lovable about children, is their kind of innocent spontaneity. But that, you know, that is something to appreciate. And of course, loving family and care, and that, you know, it gives you a security that an infant needs, security, because it's helpless, you know, like a newborn baby, totally dependent upon the mother. It can't feed itself or look after itself in any way. So this is where the love of a mother is so important, because it's absolutely necessary for survival. And fathers tend to get more influence as they get older, because they tend to be the judges and the worldly advisors. And this is just generalizations, but all this, like the skillfulness of living, like it has its good effect on innocent children. So you can see you hear so many sad stories about children who were not loved by their parents, who were orphans and things like this, because they lacked that kind of early influence. It's hard, it's something that if you have no perspective on, you tend to, you get depressed, and in life, your life is basically one of insecurity. So I look at my own life. I had very good parents. There's a kind of security and confidence that generates from that others don't have, because of the lack of that nurturing, loving presence. And the precepts are a good foundation to encourage, not to force on people. Like, as I was saying before, you have to ask for the precepts. I can't just make you take the 5 precepts, some kind of moral injunction or command or imperative, but it is just an encouragement to take responsibility for action and speech. And of course that includes the family life. And we get attached to things, but it's not to get rid of attachment, to understand, like meditation is to understand attachment, the limitation of it. Like if a mother attaches to her children too much, then when they grow up and they leave, the mother gets very distraught because she has no her attachment is broken. And that, she's not prepared for, when you devote yourself to caring for young children for 15, 20 years, suddenly they leave and you haven't realized your attachment, you've depended on it, you've identified with it, then you suffer a lot from the separation or the change, where with meditation, right understanding, you're prepared for these contingencies that arise in life. And you can adapt to changing conditions in a way that you can if you just become dependent on certain conditions, and then when they change, then you're left desolate or lonely or confused. So like meditation allows us to develop and adapt to the inevitable changes that we all have to experience. And and children are, they're that's where it's important that they receive that kind of attachment in the beginning. Attachment that's necessary for survival. But then we can, like encouraging mothers to be aware of attachment is like this. It's not telling them they should let go of their children or not be attached to them, but observe, be the witness, the puto, observing attachment, the need to be the mother and be the nurturer and all that is like this. So you're not coming from an ideal of, a perfect mother, but from the way you are, you begin to, just through that kind of wisdom, you let go of attachments. It doesn't mean that you're not attached to anything, but you're no longer enslaved to the attachments. It's no longer just blind attachment, it's wise attachment. Excuse me.
Okay. Says, is that also valid for adults? Because adults have attachments too that reflect the attachments.
Yeah, same thing. Like being a monk, you get attached. It's not that I'm not attached to anything, but I know I understand attachment, and like Luang Por, he was a very charismatic teacher. Really lovable personality. He had a very charismatic personality, very charming. I loved to be around him, be with him, and during my time when I spent the first 10 years living either in his monastery or in his branch monasteries, I became very attached to Ajahn Chah, and he would challenge that. Like at first, when I first went there, I needed a lot of kind of attention, so he gave me an enormous amount of attention, and I appreciated that. Then later on, he didn't give me much attention. But I developed a trust in the fact that he was operating from a wisdom level, knowing in the beginning what I needed, kind of intuitively. It wasn't formulaic. I think it was mainly just his intuition. He never had to deal with a Western monk before, and but his intuitions were very accurate, and then also knowing that would bring attachments, would also, he learned to point that out, he wasn't trying to get away from me, but he was pointing to the fact of attachment was like this. And once you have that perspective, then when he became ill, I was living in England, and in 1992, he had a stroke, and very severe, and he was in the middle of the Pansa, the season, the 3 months retreat season. And Ajahn Pansano, who was Canadian monk, in the habit of Wat Nana Chat, would keep me informed. So, I couldn't very well leave in the middle of the Pansa. So as soon as the Pansa was over, I took the first flight from London to Bangkok and went to see Luang Por Chah in the hospital. He was in the Chulalongkorn Hospital in Bangkok. And I remember when I first saw him, he was, a monk wheeled him out. He was in a wheelchair, just sitting there, completely kind of like a sack of potatoes. this charming, charismatic personality wasn't operating. It just sitting kind of slumped in a wheelchair, unable to talk or respond. And I was with a Thai lay supporter, a woman who was very devoted, and we got down on our knees and started bowing to Ajahn Chah. We were crying, I felt this incredible sadness. And then I thought, this is the ultimate teaching, that Luang Por Chah was always encouraging. He gave me everything I needed long before this happened. And now he's no longer the charismatic, charming personality that I was attached to, but suddenly I had this sense of growing up a bit, like I'm now I'm the guru. I have to be my own guru now. I have this ability. He's given me this right to operate from wisdom rather than from just having a wise teacher tell me what to do. And so, it was quite a powerful feeling of empowerment for me, seeing Luang Por Chah like that. It was sad because there was so much, everybody was desperately trying to cure him, trying to get him back to his old charming self. There was, and the whole country was focused on him. He was news. The royal family, the queen was sending food to the hospital, and so all the monks that were taking care of him were under this incredible pressure, to keep him alive. And I got the impression that he actually wanted to die. He was just trying to say, let me go, don't try to keep me alive just, on artificial means. But because of the society and the pressure and the publicity, no monk could take responsibility for just letting him die. So they kept him alive for 10 years. And they had excellent care. And during that 10 years that he was unable to speak, the Sangha around Luang Por Chah really worked together. It united the Sangha in a very powerful way. The monks and the nuns, everybody looked after him out of love, out of respect. So his 10 years as being incapacitated was also a blessing to the rest of us. But to see the power of like this teaching gives us, it's empowering each one of you. It's not just telling you to believe me or believe the Buddha, that you can't doubt the Buddha, or you've got to believe in it and act a certain way. This isn't the Dhamma. It's not Dhamma to assume that, but it's the kind of beauty of Buddha Dhamma is that it's investigatory. It's encouraging us to examine, to look at life, to be honest with ourselves, to really have that courage to face life as we experience it, and the emotional habits and conditions that we have to live with as individuals.
I'm afraid we have to come to an end of all this wonderful flow of Dhamma. The monks need to eat, so we'll give a blessing before the meal, and then we'll take our leave from you all.
So So I want to give a blessing for your generosity, your attention, and Buddha established this monastic form, so we're dependent on all of you for the basic necessities. So here at Sunyata, they provide me with a nice warm room, private ensuite bathroom, comfortable blankets in bed, and good food. And I want to express my gratitude for this. This is what keeps the Sangha alive from this strange institution of alms mendicancy. Always amazed me because it, when Luang Por Chah wanted me to come to England, I thought, how am I going to survive in London? I don't know anybody in London. And they're not Buddhists. How can you be an alms mendicant, in London? And all the doubts began to arise. And a few days before we left for England, I went to Luang Por Chah and expressed my doubts. I said, I don't see how I can keep the Vinaya and not handling money and dependent upon alms food, how that's going to work in a non-Buddhist country. And Luang Por Chah said, are there good people in England? And I said, I'm sure there are. And he said, go. And he was right. So I give this blessing. Yatavari vaha pura paripurenti sakarang ewa mewa ito tinang betanang ubakapati ichitang baditang dumhang kipamewa samichatu saphe burento sangapa janto banaraso yata manicho di raso yata Samparo vinasatu mate pavat mantarayo sukhiti kayuko bhava abhivadana sili sanichang vatapachayino chattaro dhamma vatanti ayuvano sukhang palang bhavantu sabba mangalang Rakantu sabba devata sabba buddhanuparena sathasoti bhavantu te bhavantu sabba mangalang rakantu sabba devata sabba dhammanuparena sathasoti bhavantu te bhavantu sabba mangalang rakantu sabba devata Sabbha Sangha Nuparena Sathasoti Bhavantu Te